Picture a girl standing at the edge of a river somewhere in the ancient world. No calendar on the wall, no name for the month. She is 16, maybe 17, old enough to have carried firewood for years. And this morning, something is different. She notices it before she understands it. There is no one standing beside her who has warned her this was coming. No preparation of any kind, just her body in a morning that changed everything. Now hold that image and stretch it across time. Every woman alive today descends from a line of women who each met that same morning. Going back 10,000 years, 100,000, further. This is one of the most repeated experiences in the entire history of our species. And it is also one of the most completely buried. Pick up almost any book about ancient life, and you will find hunting, tools, burial rituals. You will search for a long time before you find a single honest paragraph about this. So let's spend a few minutes actually looking at it. And I want to hand you one question right now. How does something that happened to roughly half of every human generation leave almost no evidence behind it all? We will come back to that. Before we go near prehistory, we need 60 seconds of biology. Puberty is not simply an age you reach. Your body is running a calculation. Are there enough stored resources here to survive the demands of reproduction? A researcher named Rose Frisch put forward an influential idea in the 1970s, that the first period depends not on age but on body composition. A minimum threshold of stored fat has to be reached before the body will allow it. Age is not the dial being turned. Energy is, which means girls in the ancient world reach that threshold later than you might assume. Modern populations see first periods arrive around age 12 or 13, but researchers studying communities living the older way found it arriving closer to 16. Harder physical demands, less consistent caloric intake, a body slower to reach the line. So picture the girl at the edge of that river again. She is not 12, she is closer to 16 or 17, and this is genuinely the first time. Now here is where I have to be completely straight with you. We do not know what she felt. Not a guess dressed up as history. We simply do not know. She left no account. There is nothing written down because writing did not exist yet. What we can do instead is look at what anthropologists have actually documented. Societies studied in the 20th century, communities with no connection to each other, no shared ancestry, showed a pattern that appeared again and again. The first period was not hidden, it was marked. In dozens of documented cultures across Africa, the Americas, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, first menstruation was treated as a formal event, a threshold. Sometimes the girl entered a period of separation, sometimes ritual, sometimes outright celebration, dancing, feasting, ceremony. Almost nowhere in the ethnographic record is the instinct to conceal it and say nothing. That instinct, silence, shame, nothing to discuss here, appears to be a fairly recent cultural development, not a deep human one. Now here is the part that makes archaeologists quietly frustrated. Working out what ancient women actually used, physically, practically, is very close to impossible. And the reason is completely mundane. Whatever they reached for, it was organic. Moss was likely, soft plant fiber, scraps of hide, material already in daily use for wound dressing, for a dozen ordinary tasks. But organic material does not survive. It rots. It does not sit in the earth for 40,000 years waiting to be cataloged. So when someone confidently tells you exactly what materials prehistoric women used, ask them what they are pointing at, because there is nothing to point at. What exists are informed inferences. That is not the same as evidence. The physical record is silent, then writing arrives, and suddenly we have something to read. The oldest surviving medical document focused on women's health is the Kahun Gynecological Papyrus from Egypt, dated to around 1825 BCE. It addresses menstruation directly, alongside pregnancy, plainly, without ceremony about the subject matter. The Ebers Papyrus from around 1550 BCE distinguishes between menstrual bleeding that follows a regular pattern and bleeding that does not. A clinical distinction a physician was expected to track. This is 3,500 years ago, and Egyptian medicine was already filing this under serious clinical territory. Cyranus of Ephesus, writing in the 1st or 2nd century CE, produced a multi-volume work on gynecology. He even recommended rest during painful periods, advice that would sit without comment on a modern information leaflet. Real texts, real medical seriousness, thousands of years deep, and yet the physical objects remain almost entirely absent. Cloth rots, fiber disappears, which brings us to a fact that should genuinely shift your sense of what is recent and what is not. The products sitting on a pharmacy shelf today, treated as completely unremarkable, they are shockingly new. The first commercially sold menstrual pad had a name. Lister's Towels, it appeared in 1896. It failed. Victorian society considered the product too shameful to advertise, too shameful for a woman to name aloud at a counter. What changed things was not cultural progress, it was a war. Nurses during the First World War observed that surplus wound dressing absorbed blood far more effectively than cloth. An entire product category grew out of a field hospital, almost by accident. The tampon with an applicator was not patented until 1931. It did not reach shelves under the name Tampax until the mid-1930s. Let that settle. Our species has been menstruating for several 100,000 years. The products we treat as ordinary background objects, as unremarkable as a light switch, are less than 100 years old. That answers the question I gave you at the beginning. How does something this universal leave almost no trace? Two reasons, and they are not equal. The materials perished. That is one. But the other is that the culture around them went quiet, and the quiet is the newer thing by far. For the overwhelming majority of human history, this was handled, passed between women, one generation to the next, using whatever the world offered that season. No product, no industry, no silence. The silence came later. So the next time you walk past that aisle in a shop, think about what it replaced. Think about the girl at the edge of the river, and the tens of thousands of years of girls before her and after her, meeting that morning with no preparation, no explanation, and no equipment, and getting on with the day regardless. That is one of the quietest and most continuous threads running through everything our species has ever done, and almost no one ever thought it worth writing down.